We all know that there's a lot of wonderful things that we get enormous benefit from that we take for granted. You can probably think of a lot yourself. You know, think about good health. Think about good health. That's something that when you're young and vibrant, you just take for granted. But when I wake up in the morning and I feel really, really good, like I think maybe I felt when I was 18 years old, or your age, early 20s, whatever, you know what I do? I call 911. There's got to be something wrong with me. I don't get to get to the hospital quick. So free markets are another benefit that we take for granted. We get enormous benefits from free markets, yet we tend to take them for granted. Now, in both cases, we would miss good health. When we lose it, we miss it. Desperately we miss it. If all of a sudden there were no free markets, would you be happy? Even people who criticize free markets, if they had to live in, let's take an extreme example, North Korea, they would not be happy. They would miss enormously the benefits that they took for granted in free markets. There's this parallel between good health and free markets, a big difference between the two. We take both of them for granted, but in the case of good health, people might take it for granted, but they don't criticize free markets. They don't criticize good health, do they? Have you ever heard anybody say, good health is overrated, I don't care, we might want something else that's better than good health. We don't hear that. Good health is not criticized. Free markets are another matter. People that I will call or refer to as market critics, and there's others as well. We all are a little critical of markets. I mean, concern about markets and skepticism about markets and commerce and trade, that actually is all societies and all cultures. There's a little bit of skepticism. Even economists have occasional skepticism about it. But there's widespread desire for an economy that doesn't rely just on self-interest and promoting our own interest, going out and competing and trying to get more for ourselves. A lot of people think that we should have more concern and an economy that's more likely to foster caring for others. You know, seeing people that you see that need help and being willing to sacrifice to help each other. A caring and sharing society, so much, much more than, say, a free market, competitive economy where we're all in it for ourselves. And it turns out that's a morality. It's a very instinctive morality, and it's a very good one. It's a family morality, thinking about the family. And for the family, it's wonderful. No matter how wealthy you are, would you be very happy without somebody that you loved, people that loved you and you loved them? That adds a tremendous amount of meaning to life. But it doesn't extend very well to the broader economic society, the global economy. Let's consider the market skeptic and their desire for sharing and caring. And I'm going to argue they're going to be disappointed. They're not going to be as happy with what they want as they think they will be. And let me go back to 1984. There's more recent examples of this, but I like the 1984 example. This is before most of you were born. But it was at the Democratic Convention in 1984, and Mario Cuomo, governor of New York at the time, gave the keynote address. His son is now the governor of New York. And Cuomo said, and I can't say it as well as Cuomo did, I saw this live on TV in 1984, and I was touched by it. This is, I think, a touching aspiration, if you will, to have. He said, liberals have a single fundamental idea regarding what a proper government should be. It's the idea of family, mutuality, the sharing of benefits and burdens for the good of all, feeling one another's pain, sharing one another's blessings, doing that reasonably, honestly, fairly, without respect for race or sex or geography or political affiliation. Now, how many people think that's a good aspiration to have? Yeah, I'll raise my hand on that. I'll raise my hand on that. The people in the convention hall went crazy. They wanted to dump Mondale, who was going to be anointed the nominee of the party for president, and bring up Cuomo. There was kind of a bubblet effect, a boomlet, if you will, in favor of Cuomo. We're going to come back to this. But just let your imaginations run wild. And, you know, let's wish upon a star. That's nice. They do that in Hollywood all the time. And they have all kinds of interesting ideas about how to improve the world. They don't know anything about it, but they certainly wish upon a star. That's the world they live in. So let's wish upon a star. And look at what would be required of the economy that Cuomo is talking about. The main features of the economy I have in mind, and Cuomo had in mind, I don't know what he had in mind, is everyone is honest and trust each other. I'm honest, you're honest, you trust me to be honest, I trust you to be honest. If you say something, I believe it. If you signal me, if you communicate with me, I know you're telling roughly the truth. I mean, you know, the truth is always a little bit unknown, and we care as much about others, including complete strangers, regardless of their race, their sex, their sexual, political, or religious preferences, or where they are from. They care as much about others as they care about themselves. If we're going to have that kind of sharing that Cuomo is talking about, we have to really be concerned with others. All of us are in instant and simultaneous communication with literally billions, not millions, but billions of strangers. People will never know. People, we don't speak the same language as they are. They speak just complete strangers. We don't know, never will know them, don't speak the same language, have very different aspirations and very different understandings of how the world works. And we will share with complete strangers anytime they communicate to us that they value something we are consuming at the margin, meaning another unit of it. They value another unit of what I'm consuming, say, more than I do. And I'll communicate and tell them what I value, and I'll do it honestly. And when they tell me that they honestly value it more than I do, I will have to share with them. I will share with them. And when I tell them that they're consuming something that I value more at the margin, they'll share with me. Now, it's a pretty nice world, isn't it? Some of you are a little skeptical, but I think it would be a pretty nice world, and I'll explain why. But there's a problem with it. Believing this is possible is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? How many people think this is possible? Do we any hope that we're going to live in a world where we care as much about strangers as we do ourselves and the ones we love? I don't think so. What about the communication? What about communication? You know, we've come a long way in communication in my lifetime. We've come a long way. We've got an amazing communication system. But are we ever going to have a communication system where we can be in simultaneous, real-time communication with billions of people and they're in communication with us? I mean, that's one hell of a conference call. Yeah, are we ever going to have that kind of communication? Well, we might say, well, I doubt it. You know, some people doubt it, right? You doubt it?
Yep.
I thought so. I hope so. I doubt it. Well, I doubt it a little bit. I'll get to that in a minute. Well, people aren't that honest either. Are they? Are people honest? I mean, I hate to break this to you, but not even politicians. And they really work hard at telling the truth. Even they fib occasionally. Even if we had this communication and we cared as much about others and we knew they were telling the truth, how could we know for sure? How do we really know how much they need. We're willing to share with them, but how much do we know what we need? They might be telling the truth, but boy, they have to keep it current because other people will be sharing with them, right? And if you're going to share with somebody, you want to know how much other people are sharing with them. So we'd have to keep track of, all kinds of things, not just their preferences, but what other people are doing. How do we do that? Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think those people in the convention in '84, and they heard Cuomo, do you think they really believe that government has both the willingness and the ability to enforce an agreement would lead to that kind of sharing?
Some of them did.
You think they had that?
I think some did.
They actually believe that?
Some of them did.
Huh?
I think some of them did.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Good point. My answer to that question is maybe in the emotions of the moment. In the emotions of the moment, people really did believe this is possible. They acted like they believed it. They were sharing and crying and just kind of in a state of bliss in a sense. And I think they did believe it. I would doubt if in their more rational moments after the emotional wore off they would believe it. But for the moment they believed it, and they were surrounded by people who emotionally believed it too. And it's amazing what people can believe if all their friends and all their neighbors and the people around them are believing the same thing. We can believe almost anything. It's called a network effect. When enough people believe something, just look at clothing. Take a picture of yourself now and look at it 20 years from now. And you'll say, well, I wore that, but you wear it now. Why do you think it's cool? Because your friends are wearing much the same thing. Why do I wear a silly-ass tie? Well, I've been doing that a long time. Well, actually, I don't do it when I'm home, but because everybody else I identify with and respect seem to wear ties. I'll never forgive either my college roommate who told me, this is sad, I might break down, told me, I think I was a junior in college, said, Dwight, you think all these people around you, all your buddies believe in Santa Claus. No one on campus believes in Santa Claus. My God, I didn't know that. And when I found out that no one else believed in Santa Claus, what did I do? I threw Santa Claus under the train. I gave up on him. I didn't believe him anymore either. So we can believe a lot, and we're surrounded by people who are true believers in a political situation. We're very likely to believe too. Another question. You think many of those in the convention hall who were exorbitant in favor of this picture that Como had laid out for us, do you think that they would be pleased with the sharing that Como actually talked about? Do you think they say, oh, this is so cool. I get to share with people all over the world. And I care for them. Maybe I'll care for them. And they'll care for me. Look at all the likes I'll get. This is better than Facebook. Do you think they'd really like it? Market skeptics. And all these people were market skeptics. They weren't enthusiastic about the market. These true believers at the Democratic Convention in 1984. I've said they're hard to please, right? And that's what I'm going to try to argue, that they are hard to please. Well, how would I prove that? Well, I can't. But I can go through a mental exercise about how I could prove it to your satisfaction, if only I could do it. Now, I've got to have a time machine. Got to have a time machine, and I got to go back to 1984. I am going to follow Cuomo after he gives this rousing, his wonderful speech. It really was. You couldn't listen to it without being moved. I couldn't listen to it without being moved. I didn't have a complete breakdown, but close to it. I'm going to follow Cuomo, and here's what I'm going to say to these conventioneers. Thousands of them, and millions on TV, of course, but I can't hear them. I'm going to say, Cuomo is right. We can have this kind of society, and government can give it to us, this kind of sharing. And, I know you're going to give me a round of applause and cheering, and maybe even a standing ovation when I'm through here, but it'd be nothing compared to what I would get when I say that to that convention, right? They'd go bananas cheering, we can have it, we can have it, I can prove it, I'll show you in a minute. And it's government that's going to be largely responsible for it. And then I would say, in fact, our government is already enforcing such a system and giving us this kind of sharing. It's already here, folks. And they go crazy again. Well, tell us about it, tell us about it. And then if I really want to bring the house down, I'll tell them, now, there's a problem. Government isn't doing as good a job creating the society as they could. But that's the fault of the Republicans. And boy, when I say that, they would just, they would ride me out. They might throw Hume overboard and elect me for president. The cheering is about to stop for old Dwight Lee on that podium. Because you know what I'm going to tell them next? I'm talking about the free market. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the invisible hand of Adam Smith. If I could continue at that convention, I would explain it to them. But I'm being booed out of the room now, right? They are going crazy with hate. What do you mean the free market? The free market exploits people. They don't share. No one cares about others in the free market. They're only interested in themselves. Well, you're not going to boo me out of the room yet. You're not going to give me the standing ovation I would really love to have. I know that, but you're not going to boo me out of the room because you have to be here. You don't get any credit, right? You'll be here until I finish. You just keep that in mind. How do we get the communication system I've talked about? Every time you walk into a grocery store, I've looked this up, about 42,000 items in a grocery store, standard grocery store, maybe there's a big grocery store, I don't know, are there waiting for you. And on each of those items, there's a price. That price tells you something. That you haven't thought about this, I don't think. Maybe some of you have, if you've taken economics and really learned to love it early on. But on that price is communicating something to you. It communicates how much other people all over the globe, actually, there's some variations because of transportation costs and so forth. It tells you how much they value another unit of what you're thinking about buying. For example, if the people in, say, Canada decide they want more bananas for whatever reason, and they're trying to buy more bananas, what will happen to the price of bananas in Charleston? They'll go up a little bit, right? They'll go up a little bit. And what will you do? And you know those people are pretty honest, by the way. That it might not be 100% accurate, but it's very close, closer than any bureaucrat could ever get it. And it fluctuates constantly with respect to demand conditions all over the world. You know, you can see that price, and you could say, oh, I'm not going to play this game. I'm going to communicate that I value bananas far more than those Canadians do because I don't want to share with them. And you could do that. You could pick up the bananas the price has gone up a little bit, and you could say, I'm going to buy more of them. I know, well, you say, I'm not going to buy any more. But you take them to the checkout center. These are only, I don't know what bananas cost, $2.05 a pound. You know, but I'm going to pay you $20 for them. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to lie about how much I love bananas. Is anybody going to do that? Not likely to do that. You'll be honest in terms of evaluating your preference for bananas, how much they're worth to you, and you will say, I'm going to buy bananas only up to the point where another banana is worth to me no less than what at least as much as I'm paying for. That's what we do. We roughly figure out how much we value another banana and buy it if we value it more, and don't if we value it less than the price we're paying, which is the value that others place on it. So basically we're acting as if we have concern for others. when they tell us they value bananas more, we'll see a higher price, reduce our banana consumption, because we're saying if they value another unit more than I do, I will act as if I'm concerned with them as I am myself. I'll reduce my bananas so they can have more. We'll do that as long as they think, they send a price that they value it more than we do. That's pretty interesting, I think. I think it's really interesting. Amazing that we could do that in response to prices. We haven't even think about prices in terms of sharing, do we? And you know what else? We share with others regardless of their race, their religious preferences, their geography, whether they're a foreigner or domestic, what language they speak. We don't know what, it might be French Canadians. In the marketplace, we all speak the same language. Do I know who I'm sharing with? I might be a total bigot, right? I might not like French Canadians, but I don't know that they're French Canadians. I just see the price go up, and I'll share with French Canadians. In fact, see, that price is what's so cool about that price is it doesn't give me a lot of redundant information. They communicate with me one thing only, and that is they want more bananas, and I don't know who it is that's communicating. I don't know where they live. But we don't have to ask how the kids are. We don't have to ask what the weather is in Canada. We know it's pretty bad. None of that stuff has to be communicated. All we need to know is that the price of bananas has gone up. That's wonderful. Cuts out on a sexual orientation. We don't care. Nobody's a bigot in that regard or any other regard when it comes to the market. Knowing how much others are sharing, we don't need to know that. All we need to know is the price. Well, it should be clear that the government could not directly mandate this kind of sharing, could they? Could the government have a big bureau, the U.S. Department of Sharing, and send out directives telling you how many bananas to eat and when to eat less and when to eat more? Could they do that? Would they have any idea? The government operates largely in an informational vacuum. Much of the things they are doing, they have not the foggiest idea how people's preferences are impacted, what people would do if they had the freedom to make up their own minds, what the costs are, what the benefits are. They couldn't do this. And even if they could do it, by the time they found out all this information and wrote up the mandates and the surveys and all that and sent out the directives, what would happen? The Canadians would have changed their mind. Now, there's no way the government generate this kind of sharing directly. But let's give the government credit. Oh, well, let's not give the government credit yet. If they tried, what would they do? They'd do what I was saying a minute ago. They'd be writing up directives and things like that. But you would expect, let's go back and give them credit. All they have to do is be a referee and kind of referee market activity. And just quickly, respecting property rights, making sure they don't, grab your property or other people don't grab your property without paying you a price that you voluntarily agree with, enforcing contracts, respecting property rights, providing some infrastructure, and a few other things we could go over, but basically being referees and not getting involved in the game. Calling balls and strikes, but not trying to hit the ball themselves. And doing this while raising the limited tax that they need with a simple tax code without special interest exemptions, and protecting our freedom within broad limits to enter exchanges. Any exchange is peaceful. That's what they do. And if they can do that and a few other things, then they've gone a long way towards achieving the kind of society, the kind of sharing that Cuomo was talking about. Okay, let's put Cuomo back on the board. The sharing of benefits, you can read that. If the government attempted to do that directly, now is the government good, for example, about ignoring race and sex and all these things when they make decisions? I don't think so. But they're not good at other things either. If the government attempted to achieve this directly, what you would find is, in the name of social justice, There's no injustice in this world, let me tell you. Not when the government gets involved. They'll stamp it out at every opportunity. And they'll do it with a subsidy. Or they'll do it with some controls on prices, minimum wages, privileges to certain groups that lobby well but deserve privileges, regulations, tax loophole, third-party payments, and go on and on and on. Now, do any of those things, they can help people, right? But they don't help people as much as we often think they do. In fact, they actually harm a lot of people. And they often, most of these things, to be perfectly honest, and I'll answer this or talk about this if you want to at the end with questions, they often hurt the very people you want, or claim you want to help. Poor people. They often benefit the wealthy at the expense of the poor. They don't move us towards this nice caring and sharing. They undermine the system that allows that to happen, make it work less effectively. And all of which, because all these things I just mentioned, distort the information and the incentives communicated through market prices and reduce the ability of Cuomo's ideals to be achieved through voluntary exchange. But how many people really want Cuomo's ideals to be achieved anyway? Now, we asked that question before, and a lot of people said they don't really want that. Let me talk about that a little bit. When people who claim they want sharing, even if you convince them, if they were open-minded, they would realize that this market we do a lot of sharing through market, and it's rather amazing the amount of sharing they do. But would they be willing to give up some of these loopholes and some of these special interest benefits that they get, or they feel good about they thinking other people are getting them? Would they be willing to give them up to maintain that system of economic, the market? I don't think so. I don't think so. If all you got to do is open your eyes and know that they're benefiting the wealthy in many cases at the expense of the poor. And if they were really serious, they'd be trying to get rid of those programs. And if you try to get rid of those programs, it's very tough. There's not much evidence that the political process is going to respond to that. No matter how much you care about the poor, most people aren't going to push for those programs. Let's look at whether people really are really interested in the sharing. Many people just simply find it comforting to believe that the poor, for example, are being helped by a lot of these social programs. And I could spend hours talking about this. In fact, I tried it the other day with a group of the students about how people like to go vote and feel good about themselves because they vote to help the poor. And it doesn't cost them anything because their vote is not likely to make any difference. It's the probability their vote will be decisive is effectively zero. But they feel good about helping the poor by just casting a vote and not actually making a contribution, a private contribution. And I've tried this at parties. I've tried to argue that at parties when we were drinking wine and having a good time. And I knew I was not going to get invited back to the party because I never get invited back to parties. I'm an economist. But, and I've asked people, what about this program? Do you like that program? It's supposed to help the poor. Oh, yeah, I vote for it. I vote for people who are going to help the poor with that program. And I say, well, and I can do it pretty effectively. Give me a little time and don't have any wine thrown at me, wine bottles. I'll explain why that does not help the poor. It harms the poor. It limits their opportunities. It makes the country poor. It makes opportunities less available. And if you vote for it, you're voting for the wrong thing. You're voting to impoverish people. Do they say, oh, well, that is really interesting. I'll have to think about that. They don't want to believe that. They don't want to believe that they're not doing good when they vote for programs because it makes them feel so good and it doesn't cost them a damn thing. They don't say this, but they say, they are thinking, you're going to take that away from me? I like voting for things and feeling good about it. And what do they normally do? They just walk off. They don't think about it. And I'm not quite that blatant at parties. I try to get invited back. I don't, but I don't really, I'm not really quite that obnoxious. But people feel comfortable feeling good about voting for programs that they really want to believe are helping the poor, even though the evidence is pretty clear they're not. A common view is that if we're really going to help poor people or share like I'm talking about, we have to do it intentionally. We're kind of programmed to think when things happen, that they happen intentionally. Somebody's behind it. Somebody made the decision to intentionally do this. Used to be even the wind gods, the wind was blowing. Why? Well, because the wind gods made it happen. We've kind of gotten away from some of that, but we still have a strong feeling that intention is important. And so we think, this market, nobody intended to have all that sharing. You've been sharing all your life. Sharing with millions of people. But you never intended it. There's something not quite, not very satisfying about that. For economists, it's amazing. We think this is really cool. All these things happen unintendedly. But most people, they can't get their heads around that. They don't think about it much. Most people, particularly market skeptics, have never thought of responses in responding to changes in market prices have anything to do with sharing. And I'm not talking just about market skeptics here. How many of you people, I've already asked, you've never thought about it, have you? How many people go shopping quite often? Did you ever think of the fact that you were sharing with others by not buying as much as you might ideally like because the prices were high? You never thought of that as sharing, did you? Well, you were sharing, and I'm proud of you. I really am. I want you to feel good about yourself because of that sharing. You've been doing it all your life. Most people view market prices not as an opportunity to share, not as a blessing, but as an aggravation. People, when they think of prices, they think in terms of, well, the price went up. That means I'm getting poor, somebody's getting richer, somebody's gouging me. They think of prices in terms of the distribution of income. They never think of prices in terms of motivating people to make decisions that benefit the rest of us, because it's in their interest to do so. When the prices are right, people improve their own well-being by taking actions that improve the well-being of others, the invisible hand. People don't think of prices that way. Maybe they do on tests in economics programs, but they tend to forget it. They tend to think of prices in terms of somebody's gouging me. When prices go up, that is your opportunity to do your best to share with others. When prices are going up, other people now are telling you, please share with me. And we do, but we don't like it, do we? How many people, and you complain about it, how many people have you seen that came back and said, well, I went shopping today and the prices went up, and I thought, oh boy, this is my opportunity to share with others. Have you ever heard anybody think that? Boy, I was shopping and I had the perfect shoes, and then I saw the perfect handbag. I'm picking on the women here. I could pick on the men. I mean, I could talk about bean dip and beer while I'm watching football. Yeah, or eyeshadow, whatever. But let's think about not bean dip, perfect pair of shoes. And you get a perfect pair of shoes and you see the perfect handbag that go with it, what do? You think about, if I buy the handbag, I'm not sharing. It's a pretty expensive handbag. That means other people value it probably a lot. Yeah. Is this my opportunity to share with others? I won't buy the handbag. How many people ever thought that? Nobody. I don't even think it when I find a perfect bean dip, and beer, and I'm going to watch the football game. I don't think about sharing either. I think about who's going to win the game. So I'm not criticizing people who are market skeptics. We all respond. That's why it works so well. We don't even know what we're doing. It's automatic. We don't have to think about it. And another thing people don't realize, how many people thought, actually, there's a real bright side to high prices. Aren't you happy that when you go into the store, you can buy things and jack up the prices? When you buy things, you're increasing the prices. But by increasing prices, you are getting more goods and services. That's the only way you can communicate with millions and millions and billions of people around the globe to effectively share with you. If we didn't have prices, how would you do it? Would you call them up? Would you put an ad in the paper? Wouldn't work anyway. You wouldn't do it. We don't need to do that. I was in London. It was in the fall of 96 or 7, I think. And I like to walk around London. My wife used to work there, and she goes to the opera, and I walk around in parks. We go there quite a bit. But my wife with me this time. We went to Kensington Gardens. Have you ever been to Kensington Garden? Yeah. Well, what happened in the fall of 97? Princess Di was killed in a traffic accident in Paris. Apparently, what I read later, and I saw it, there were flowers at the gate at the Kensington Garden, but they were all over the mall leading up to Buckingham Palace. Everywhere you went with flowers. Apparently, about, 40% of all the flowers that were sold in that period of time went to London. The people in London wanted flowers to show their grief, to show their admiration, to show whatever it was, their emotions. They were able to get it. They were able to get about 40% of all the flowers available on the globe. Could they have done that without markets? Yeah. You might have been sharing with them. You didn't even know about it. You might not have bought flowers that you would otherwise have bought because the price went up. What do most people want when they think about prices? Free goods. What did the millennials, the sharing, they wanted sharing. The Occupy Wall Street folks, what did they want? Free goods. Well, that's the very opposite of sharing. When you want free goods, and we all like free goods, again, I'm not just talking about market skeptics, but free goods, boy, what do free goods mean? It means you have to share with me, but I'm not going to share with you. If you eliminate prices, where's the sharing? See, we all benefit by higher prices because we share with others, but they also mean other people are sharing with us. And can you imagine how poor we would be if we didn't allocate goods and services as to markets? We just had some bureaucrat decide who got what and how much. That's called impoverishment. That simply wouldn't work very well if they were tried it on a large scale. The final thing is that people don't like about this, the people are skeptical of markets is, Lee's kind of misrepresenting the market because, it really isn't based on caring. People share, sure. People share, sure. But they didn't do it because they really liked other people. They did it out of self-interest. And so I don't like self-interest. Well, okay. Maybe you don't like self-interest. Adam Smith Week. Good time to check in with Adam. Smith in page 26. If you read there's a lot of nice quotes of Smith of Smith's, and you realize what a fantastic writer he was. How fantastic he was in terms of expressing himself. In civilized society, each stands at all times in need of the cooperation and assistance of great multitudes, while his whole life is scarce sufficient to gain the friendship of a few persons. He's talking about what we need prices for, what we need markets for, is to get the cooperation of millions of people around the globe to make sure that supermarket is stacked full of goods. When you go there, next time you can be sure what you want is waiting for you in a convenient location. You have to share yourself in order to get that, but we're far better off because of it. And Smith didn't have anything wrong. He wasn't a proponent or celebrating greed. It's like Isaac Newton. Did he celebrate gravity? No, he just said, gravity exists. Let's learn something about it. Let's find out to harness it. You know, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to design a policy. I'm going to design a policy for health care for everybody, and it doesn't work out very well. And they say, people are greedy. It doesn't work because people are greedy. Well, what would you say about an aeronautical engineer who designed an airplane and the damn thing never got off the ground? So they designed another one and it never got off the ground. And he says, well, I'm a good aeronautical engineer. This is a great airplane. The problem is gravity. You'd think he was a basket case, right? You'd snicker at him. You'd laugh at him. You'd pay attention to him. But these politicians, they say, well, you know, we got this great program here, but it's not working out because people are greedy. If you design a program and don't take greed into consideration or self-interest, you got an airplane that won't fly. You've got to accept greed, or interest, self-interest. You know, anyway, what is greed? That's the other guy's self-interest, right? Your interest, your self-interest is justified and you know, it's okay. The other guy's greed, self-interest, is, it's not justified. It's socially irresponsible, the other guy's self-interest. Smith says, look, we just accept it. And it's probably a good thing we do have self-interest because, you know, we're each fitter to take care of ourselves than any other person is to take care, that we are to take care of anybody else. Smith also tells us the greater improvements of productive power labors have been the effective division of labor. Well, and then he says the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. Well, a lot of people talk as if what we want are saints. We don't want self-interest. We want a world with saints that, you know, do the right thing for the right reason, share because they care about others. But in fact, you know, even a saint couldn't share like we do in markets because even if they wanted to share with everybody, they don't have the information. Markets give us the information. I've already talked about that. But, you know, if we relied on saints, would we have a market big enough? Would there be enough people working and consuming and buying and selling to have an extended market so you could have specialization? No, you wouldn't have that. And you need specialization to be as wealthy as we are. People who can make more of a few things than they'll consume themselves because they know other people are doing the same thing of things that they want and they can trade for. You do what you do best and you trade for the rest. Just think about it. Would you really like a world, we kind of complain about people always wanting our money. You know, I don't like it either. You get calls and they're trying to sell you something, robocalls, and, you know, I get tired of that stuff. But, you know, they're just after my money, aren't they? But would you like to live in a world where people weren't after your money? Let's assume we had a situation where everybody became a saint. Almost everybody. And they decided they didn't want money. That was so crass, just grubbing for money. They wanted to have a spiritual existence and get in touch with the real meaning of life. And I'm not making fun of this. I'm glad some people do this. But let's assume everybody did it. And they wanted to commune with nature, you know, and appreciate the finer things in life, like the birds and the bees and all the things that we really need, you know, nature. But they're not going to be producing much because they're just going to eat acorns and, you know, and wear, I don't know, loincloths or whatever. You know, they're not going to be dressing up. They're going to be a minimal existence. Well, what would you think if almost everybody started doing that? What would happen to all those goods and services you see when you're walking into the store? They would have disappeared, wouldn't they? Well, nobody wants your money. They're not going to produce what you might be willing to buy and anxious to buy. Pretty soon you're probably getting hungry. You're trying to grow your own grub and food. Well, you know, you got a lot of saints out there, and I'm sure they'd share the acorns with you, right? But they don't think so. No, I'm talking about real saints, and they would share a few acorns with you. But you'd say, what happened? Where's McDonald's? Where's Where's the people that fill the produce department at the store? Where are they? Well, you would be really happy to have some self-interest, some greed, if you will. And Adam Smith told you why, and I will end on this. It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. And we address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. I'm so happy that there's millions of people out there that want my money. You know, I can't give it to everybody, but I spend almost all of it in return for a wonderful array of goods and benefits. But I don't consume as much as I'd like, because in respect for what others have done for me, I respond to higher prices by not consuming as much as I like, because I'm a saintly kind of guy. I want to share with others. Now think about that next time you go to the store. And if you have any questions other than why in the hell did you talk so long, I'll be glad to answer. Let's hear it.
Why don't people term it this way normally?
Well, that's a good question. And I think the answer is, when I was a graduate student, I learned two things. How to take simple ideas, render them completely incomprehensible, and how you can use calculus to do it. And when I started teaching at the University of Colorado in 1972, I was a lousy teacher because I drew diagrams and everything. Most people didn't know what in the heck I was talking about. And it took me a long time. I mean, I love economics, but I wanted to make, the market understandable for people. And it's only in the last few years that I actually started talking like this. I moved in this direction. The trouble is, most college teachers, that teach principles are too close to graduate school. That's a problem. I think it's a serious problem. Yeah, you've asked some good questions in the past.
We talked about the way how markets should be how government should be in the markets. I'm just like a little bit curious. Like, don't we still need governments like the FDA and like other institutions just to like make sure that our food is not disgusting, or workers aren't being mistreated or anything like that?
That workers aren't what?
Workers aren't mistreated or anything like that?
Yeah. And, you can look at all kinds of things the government does, and if you just look at the benefits, it looks like there's some benefits. Now, sometimes those benefits are misleading. The FDA, I want somebody to make sure that drugs aren't killing me. But the FDA has a lot of rules on effectiveness, too. There's a right to try movement now against the FDA. It's a right to try drugs that the FDA haven't approved for effectiveness 100% or with high probability, because they're dying. And they should have the right to try to take experimental drugs because they're not going to be alive after the FDA. So they slow up the availability of a lot of drugs that are available, by the way, in Europe in many cases. And if you're rich enough to fly over to Europe, you can go and get them. But most people, can't do that conveniently. There's a case to try to protect workers, but the most effective force for workers' protection is the fact that if a firm, first of all, how much would they like to pay a worker? Nothing. Now they might even like to charge a worker to work at their plant. But why do they pay in many cases, very high wages? Other cases lower, depending on how productive the worker is. Because if they don't, other firms will hire the worker away. Now, why don't they just have unsafe working conditions? Because if people are getting killed in their plant, they're not going to be able to get the workers they need. Now, that's not to say it's going to be perfect, but it is to say that it's not clear that OSHA has done anything, Occupational Safety and Health Administration or something like that. If you see the the things that the government puts out. It said OSHA came here. I wish I could draw a thing. And look at what happened. You know, the worker safety improved. Accidents decreased after that. But then if you look at what happened 20 years earlier, it was dropping even faster before OSHA came in. You know, as we got healthy, or wealthy, I should say, what we wanted a lot of things, and one thing we wanted was more safety. And we've got a lot more safety now than you had in 1880, simply because we're wealthier. And we can afford to do things. We have different kind of jobs. We can afford to provide things that we want, including safe working conditions. And if workers want them, they'll get them. The government sometimes just follows along what has already happened through the market. Now, I'm not saying they can't provide benefits to people, but we often look at the benefits and ignore the cost. And that could be a situation where we'd actually be better off without some of those benefits. I'm not for an absolutely bare-bone government, but I think we could go a lot lower than we do and still be and be better off.
So before you, like with your idea of like how buying things is like sharing, is there anything in the free market system that would actually incentivize like a general concern for others, like that's intentional?
Well, a general concern for others? We're probably one of the most generous countries in the world. And I think one reason is because we're wealthy, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and the freest. And we can do all kinds of things. But it didn't take wealth, because if you go back to 1880, that's when the Red Cross was founded, that's when animal shelters were founded. There was all kinds of charitable organizations that grew up. We had people that were helping poor people. We get the impression that if the government doesn't do it, it's not going to happen. And that's just not right. Sometimes it happens much better if the government's not doing, and groups, organizations form and start doing things. It's not going to be perfect. We were very poor in 1880s, although the late 1800s were one of the periods of the most rapid improvement in the well-being of workers in the history of the country. It's when Carnegie and Rockefeller and others were building, big companies, and they were organizing groups, and working on these companies, and they were paying them a lot by the standards of the day. But one of the things that happened is now the workers were organized around a job, a particular large business, and that made it possible for them to organize politically, and they wanted unions. And they were getting richer, but not as rich as they wanted to be, and they organized unions, and a lot of people think that was a means whereby they were able to force the firms to give them more money. To some extent that was true, but who were the real enemies of union workers? It wasn't the firms. It was other workers that weren't in the union and were being kept out of the union. They were called scabs. That's the dirtiest word a union man or woman can say. The fact is, based on what I know, and I'm biased maybe, don't have all the facts, but the union workers did get some benefits, but they got them at the expense of non-union workers.